Hey everybody, my name's Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm the director and founder of the Phoenix Center for Experiential Trauma Therapy in Media, Pennsylvania. I'm board certified in Sociometry, Psychodrama, and group psychotherapy, and an expert in traumatic stress. I'm really excited that you found this video, and I hope that you find it helpful in your work. So this video is part of an ongoing video series to promote my newly published book, Social Work, Sociometry, and Psychodrama, Experiential Approaches for Group Therapists, Community Leaders, and Social Workers. And this video is going to be devoted to Chapter 4 in the book, which is titled Social Work Philosophy Encounters Morenean Philosophy. So the first half of this video, we're going to explore Morenean philosophy, and in the second half of the video, we'll be looking at social work core values as they relate to Moreno's philosophy and the practice of sociometry and psychodrama. Another core theory in psychodrama is role theory. And so role theory is psychodrama's theory of personality. Moreno suggests that the self, the personality, is composed of all the roles that we play in our life, and that a healthy personality has a wide role repertoire, the capacity to shift between roles when needed in order for spontaneous responses. And so a healthy personality, or someone with a healthy personality, doesn't get stuck in one role all the time, but has access to a variety of roles, depending on what's needed in the situation. This phenomenon of being stuck in a role, in role theory, we call this role lock. If someone is deficient in spontaneity and stuck, confined to a single role. An example of this in mental health is the role of the addict. Someone with addiction is stuck in that role. Or the role of someone who's depressed, stuck in that role. The role of a victim is another one that we see often in trauma work. And of course, there's other roles that we can get stuck in throughout our life. Now, Moreno believes that the self emerges from the roles that we play and hold in our life, rather than the roles emerging from the self. And there's a lot of different nuances to role theory. Just want to touch upon some of the basics in this video. The concept of the role comes from the theater. Back in the ancient Greek theater, the actors used to write the script for their character on rolls of paper and roll them up. And so this is where the term role comes from in terms of theater. Moreno really believed that role theory was unique in that it transcended some of the limits of psychoanalysis and behaviorism and provided a bridge between the social sciences and psychiatry, while demystifying and simplifying psychiatric terms and ideas so that they were easy to understand by anyone. Any of our clients that we work with can understand the concept of a role. So role theory is a non-pathologizing way of conceptualizing personality, conceptualizing social issues and mental health issues. And the concept of a role is one that's cross-cultural. While roles manifest differently in different cultures, this concept can be found in just about every culture and every language. So I think it's one of the reasons why psychodrama has been adopted in so many places over the world, because so many of its ideas really fit cross-culturally, and the ideas are less focused on content and more focused on process, so that they can easily be adapted into different situations. So, in terms of role theory, Moreno describes 3 different categories of roles. The one of which being somatic roles. These are roles related to our body, to physiological experience. And these are the first roles that develop in our infancy. The role of the crawler, the role of the eater, of the drinker, the role of the crier, the role of the sleeper. These are somatic roles. The second category of roles is psychodramatic roles. And so these roles are psychological in nature, based on fantasy, based on play, imagination. These are roles related to our dreams, both our dreams while we're sleeping and our dreams in terms of visions of the future. The way that we imagine seeing ourselves in the future, or who we would like to become. These are psychodramatic roles. The roles that we play on the stage, the roles that we play in games with other people, when we dress up for Halloween, when children are role playing. These are psychodramatic roles. And the third category of roles are social roles. And these are the roles that we hold out in the world and in relationship with others. Roles such as mother, father, sibling, friend, teacher or student, police officer, activist. These are all social roles. And you'll notice that many social roles exist within role reciprocity with another role. For example, teacher and student. They go hand in hand. They're opposite roles, and they feed each other. They exist in reciprocity with each other. Parent and child. These are reciprocal roles. Now there's also what are called complementary roles. And these might be roles that complement each other. Identical roles that complement each other. Such as friend and friend. These are complementary roles. Or partner and partner. These are complementary roles. Two peers holding the same roles. Of course, there's also roles, conflictual roles. Roles that conflict with each other. And these could be social roles, or they could be internal roles that conflict with each other. And in psychodrama, we might be working with all different types of roles. Some psychodramas are entirely based on social roles. Some psychodramas are entirely psychodramatic and intrapsychic roles. And many psychodramas have a mix of different types of roles. Might include spiritual roles, might include internal roles, might include social roles, could include some somatic roles. While Moreno described these three categories of roles as three distinctly different categories, of course they all overlap in many ways. Any social role includes and is related to multiple somatic roles and or psychodramatic roles. Though Moreno believed that the cluster of all of our somatic roles, the integration of all of them, from it emerges our somatic self, our sense of ourself in our body. From the cluster of all of our psychodramatic roles emerges our psychological self, our psychodramatic self, our psyche. And from the cluster of all of our social roles emerges our social self. And so we have here the matrix of body, mind, and society. So here we can see a connection between role theory and social work philosophy, in that social work really prescribes or ascribes to a biopsychosocial spiritual approach. And we can see in Moreno's role theory that there's an element of body, mind, spirit, and the social as well. Role theory and social work really reflect the same ideas within each other and really complement each other and go hand in hand. They're complementary roles in a sense. So another aspect of role theory that's important is the different types or the different stages of role development. And so this is really core role theory. There's three different phases of role development. The first phase is about role taking, the second phase is role playing, and the third phase is role creating. And so these three phases describe the process that we sometimes go through, not for all roles, in developing a role and integrating a role into our life and into ourself. That as we're learning a new role, let's say, for example, the role of a social worker, we're first in the role training phase. We're learning, what is the role of a social worker? What does it look like? How does it fit? How do I fit within that role? How can I learn behaviors associated with that role? Who are the role models that I can look to that are modeling this role to me? And exploring some of my resistance to the role. So this is all in the role-taking phase. We're learning how to take on a new role. Now, at some point in our development, we start to get the hang of this new role. We start to get a good sense of what the role entails, skills and behaviors, competencies related to the role. And we're able to begin playing that role, taking on that role, and doing it with some spontaneity, doing it in a good enough way. And we move into the second phase of role playing. And this is where we can adequately play the role. In this case, we can play the role of a social worker. You could think of the social work internship process as a role-taking process. And that when one successfully graduates and completes their internships, gets their license, they're now in a role-playing phase in terms of the role of social worker. They can hold that role out in the world. That role's been integrated within their self, within their psyche. Now that third phase of role development is called role creating. And this is a phase that we don't actually get to in every single role in our life. Though for some roles, we move beyond just playing the role as it was taught to us and as it exists as a cultural conserve. And we move beyond that. We bring all of our spontaneity and creativity into that role. We bring ourselves into the role. And in doing so, we create a new way of being a social worker, a new way of holding that role, whatever it is. And this is described as role creating. Now, oftentimes when we get to this role creating phase, where we've created a new way of holding the role, it brings us back to role taking, in that we've created something new, and now we're in the process of learning how to take on this new role that we've created, or the role transformation that has occurred. So these are the three phases of Morenean's and Psychodrama's role theory: role taking, role playing, and role creating. And of course, there's many other aspects of role theory that we're not going to get into here. There's other phenomenon related to role theory, such as role expectation, which is the way we expect a role to feel and be before we take it on. In the example of a social work student, the way we imagine being a social worker would be. This is a role expectation. Then another role phenomenon is called role demand. This is something that we use even as a clinical intervention in psychodrama directing, where we place an expectation onto somebody else to take on a role and to play it in a certain way. We put a role demand onto a supervisee to step up into the role of social worker more fully, to further integrate that role within themselves, and to not be afraid to fully be a social worker in the world when the time is right. This would be a role demand. Now, another role phenomenon is called role fatigue. And maybe this is, in the social worker example, someone who's overworked, who's working too many hours, who isn't the best with boundaries, who's underpaid and has to work more hours. You're just exhausted of being in that role all the time. So role fatigue described as the fatigue, the exhaustion that comes with being stuck in a role. Now, when we're finally able to de-role from that role, we would experience what's called role relief, and this is another role phenomenon. The relief that comes from being able to de-role, to step out of a role, to no longer be expected or demanded to hold that role. Now, another different type of role phenomenon is called role self-congruence. And this is looking at, is a specific role, again, for example, the role of social worker, is this role congruent with my sense of self and my other roles, the collection of my other roles? Does this role fit with who I am as a person, with my personality? Or is it not congruent with who I am as a personality? And I'm sure our career choices are largely impacted by our sense of role self-congruence. Is the role of social worker one that fits with who I am? Is in terms of other career choices, is being a police officer congruent with my sense of self? Is being an activist congruent with my sense of self? Is being a doctor congruent with myself? Is being a father? Is being a therapist? There's countless examples of roles that we could consider as it relates to role self-congruence. So there's a lot more we could say about role theory, but these are the basics of role theory. So if you found this video, I encourage you to check out some of the other videos on my YouTube channel here. I hope that you did find it helpful. Feel free to reach out to me if you have further questions. There's a lot more content about all of these ideas within Chapter 4 of my book, Social Work, Sociometry, and Psychodrama. Feel free to subscribe if you want to be updated about future videos. Subscribe to the channel here, or to leave a comment below about what you found helpful or what you'd like to learn more about for future videos. We really take some of your comments and feedback into consideration when thinking about future videos that we create.